Hi, everyone. Welcome back to MIT Is, the podcast. We are your hosts, Abby Moto and Gabe Owens. Last month, we talked a lot about our time transitioning into MIT and some challenges that we've been experiencing on campus. And today, we're here to talk a little bit more about student life, especially during the pandemic, and some of our experiences that we've had throughout MIT now that we can sort of look back on our time here. So, Gabe, how are you doing?
I'm all right. This is sort of the part of the semester where everything blends together and it's some amorphous. After the first midterm, it's an amorphous blob of midterms and assignments due in this like disgusting melted combination of things piled on each other until finals, and then you move on. So we're sort of in that middle part, and I don't know like what day it is, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
How are you?
It's kind of an awful time right now. Like the academics are always hard, I would say. But there's just been a lot going on in the world that has been extremely stressful. So if you're anywhere on social media, you've probably heard about the End SARS movement. And that's going on in Nigeria, where my whole family is. So it's almost like the summer all over again with the Black Lives Matter protests. And right now it's a lot of concern about, what's going to happen with my own family in Nigeria. So I think it's just been like I've been pushing back assignments, and it's just been a really difficult time to get through. So yeah, it just shows that like when you're at MIT, it's not even just about the academics, it's about everything that happens in your life, which could just come together in a really frustrating manner. So,
Yeah, as I like to say, everything happens all the time.
mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
it just truly does. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry to hear about that, but it's always a good thing and always nice to hear when people anywhere in the world are resisting some form of oppression. And it's become obvious that police and state repression has just never gone away. And in fact, the same sort of forces we're facing now as a world have been around for a while.
Yeah.
So it's glad to see. It's always nice to see that, like the generational shift, but it's also very painful at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you mind me asking what part of Nigeria your family is from?
Yeah, so we're all from the southeastern region. My family's from a state called Enugu, so not too much has been happening there. But this past week, you may have heard of the Lekki Toll Gate massacre, and that was literally where protesters were sitting around, protesting peacefully, waving their flags, singing the national anthem, sitting on the ground, and the police before the protest called like a very like it was like very short notice. They called a curfew,
Mm-hmm.
and before the protest happened, they removed closed circuit TV from the area protesters were protesting in, and it was like around the time of the curfew they turned off the lights, which are never off in that location, and the military came in and started shooting into the crowd, and like ambulances were trying to come in, and like the army would not let them go through. So it's like it's just I was just crying when I heard it. um yeah, because it's just like
Yeah,
so
that's and,
yeah.
and like why is this happening? What are these governments supposed to be doing if not
Yeah.
protecting this very thing from happening?
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I'm so sorry. Um,
Yeah.
that's
So,
incredibly frustrating.
and I think it's frustrating because like the protesters are protesting the police themselves, um and like it's not even anything so shocking. It's like they're protesting harassment that they constantly face. And it's like I was talking
Mhm.
to my cousin and he was telling me like, yeah, if like you walk by with like a nice outfit or a nice phone, like you're automatically a target of harassment. They'll extort money from you. They will, you know, in some cases, like young people have been killed. There's been sexual violence, and it's like, you know, it's like you just ask for like the basic things just to like be left alone, and then it's like the army, which is meant to protect its citizens, comes in and, you know, assaults its
Yeah.
own citizens. So it's like, I think, you know, here in America, there is a part of me that has almost become numb to a lot of like police brutality. And, um, you know, I read it away, I, you know, study it away, I, you know, do the things that I can.
Intellectualize it away.
Exactly. And then I don't know, I think then when your family is like really in jeopardy, I don't know, it just, it bothers you to a different degree. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a tough week. It's been a really tough week.
Yeah. I hope that these things result in positive change, though. It's just absurd. The interests that the state protects should be the people,
Mm-hmm.
not something else. Um,
Yeah.
that's like a super basic thing to ask for.
Mm-hmm.
And still around the world we see that this is constantly not the case. That when we see like things like the police in an area shooting at people,
Mm-hmm.
instead of asking them what they need or making sure that people are like have a place to sleep. Instead, we
Mm-hmm.
see homeless sweeps and all these things. It's clear that their interests lie somewhere else.
Yeah.
Their job is not to protect people. Their job is to advance and maintain property rights and
Mm-hmm.
all of these things. And that comes in the form of terrorizing people sometimes.
Yeah.
Not, you know, making sure they don't get to walk home with that nice belt that they just got instead,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And it's like I'm really proud of Nigeria because the first time I went was when I was 7, and I mean it wasn't nearly as bad. The economy wasn't doing so terribly. Um, so things like this were kind of normal. Like, you know, you drove past um, you know, police checkpoint and you knew to like give them some money. Like that was just
Right.
normal.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and I think, you know, it probably stems from what's going on in the United States. Like, you know, I think people have sort of stood up and said like enough is enough. So it's this probably would not have happened a while ago. And I feel like, you know, Nigerians are really standing up not just against police brutality, but like about against like bad governance in general. Um, so I just hope something comes from it. I There's a lot of hopelessness, but I do have some hope that you know, this will be the start of something really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to echo the things you said about visiting and the relationship with the police. Uh, I'm half Mexican, so I've gone there. Like I used to go there fairly often, and I think we largely avoided the police because of the same reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One of the last times I was there, my mom was driving a car, and we turned. We were in like the like a rightmost lane, and
Mm-hmm.
then turned out of it, and then a traffic police like immediately came over and pulled us over. They were like, "That's the bus lane. You have to. We're gonna impound your car now." Like, you know, like hand on their hip and shit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna impound your car. You have to step out." And then I started like looking up the law because I was like, "This cannot possibly be correct."
Mm-hmm.
And then she like saw me with my phone, and she took it away and was like threatening to point her gun at me. And then it's just like a
Yeah.
lot of nonsense went down before we had to just give them money
Mm-hmm.
and like move on.
Yeah.
And I just was like, no, that's not what we're gonna do. But truly, at some point, like you can't resist that individually.
Mm.
There need to be collective movements.
Yeah. And it's like a bigger issue because like you look at why like states like this where the police do take advantage of its citizens, and you can look at a lot of there's a lot of common traits. There's lack of economic resources. There's, lack of educational access. There's lack of healthcare. And it's, not even, I'm not trying to, sympathize with the police, but it's like, it's a broader issue.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm like, sorry, there's like larger issues at hand here. So
No,
I think,
completely agree.
yeah, so this NSARS movement, it's like really painful to watch, but like, once again, it does give me some, iota of hope that something will change.
Yeah, and that at least people are listening, right? Like they saw what happened in the U.S. And I hope like that gave some inspiration
Yeah.
and solidarity, and also just like going along the idea that these things are very deeply rooted. It is super deeply rooted. I think even in the form of governance that these countries have formed and continue to propagate. Like the federal government of Nigeria and US are super similar. There's like
Yeah.
3 branches.
Mm-hmm.
It's heavily stratified. There's a wage gap. It's growing really quickly technologically, but at the expense of like literally the exact same issues that we see in Mexico and the US, and essentially anywhere else a neoliberal government is allowed to form and flourish unchecked, with a police force that protects its interests.
Yeah.
Anyway, that I think we've talked about that enough.
We talk about this so much.
It really is just like the central theme of this. But I guess to transition it a little bit, we talk about like the what the police like mean to do and like what they should be doing, sort of their intent, the perceived intent of these organizations, versus their effect. And intent, I guess, here is to say like what these organizations communicate about themselves, what they say that they're doing, versus the effect that they have on the people that are in them and the people around them. This is, I think, a good transition into our second topic, which is Greek life, and how these organizations often do intend good things and are designed with a specific sort of empowering focus, but end up having a unforeseen effect as a result of their design. Before we start talking about this anymore, though, I guess I want to say that we're not going to mention the organizations that we are a part of, because this isn't supposed to be a call out piece. This is just talking about the nature of Greek life from 2 very different perspectives.
Yeah.
Would you like to start by sharing your background with this?
Yeah, so it was interesting because when I was a pre-frosh, so before I entered my freshman year, I never thought I would enter Greek life. I had the stereotypical image of it. I even went to CPW and I was like, oh, this is not for me. And it was interesting because, MIT has probably the largest Greek presence in the Boston area. Like we have a ton of sororities and fraternities. And I at first didn't see myself in any of those, but I was exposed to Black Greek letter organizations in my pre-frosh time. And those were the things I was like more interested in. So, for those who are listening who don't know, there are 9 historically Black Greek organizations. And I heard about them and I was like, oh, this seems really cool. The people in it were really cool. I went to the events. I was super interested and I was like, okay, this seems like the thing for me. So I did join, and in that I was really looking for sisterhood. I was looking for, an additional support system. MIT is so hard. And, I always had this overwhelming feeling that MIT was such a short part of my life, just 4 years. And I wanted something that I could carry into the rest of my life and connections I could have afterwards. So, that's just the general spiel of why I joined Greek life, how I approached it before, and how when I was in it, I did enjoy it, and it was good for a lot of for most of the part. So that's sort of why I joined. So if you want to sort of go into why you decided to join Greek life and how you initially approached it.
Yeah, I have a similar experience prior to MIT. I didn't consume a ton of like collegiate content. I feel like there's a lot of like fraternity movies and all of these things
Mm-hmm.
that I like really never connected to. My dad dropped out of school, so I didn't have a connection through him or any of my like male role models that indicated that fraternities were anything interesting. But when I got to MIT, we have MIT has such an enormous rush process, and it's so fast and blinding
Mm-hmm.
that it sort of erases any of the other elements of fraternal existence, but just points at the shiniest, biggest things. Everyone cleans their houses, and so when we say like their houses, these are actual enormous pseudo dorms that exist just marginally outside of the dorm community, and function as dorms. But yeah, so I joined pretty early. The rush process overlaps with the first week of school. I think I'm not sure if it's. I think it's starts in like the middle and then continues into the weekend. And you have like a week essentially to meet close to 30 groups of people, and then they spend like between $10,000 and $30,000 worth of. They just spend that much to, like, to convince you that they have the best, biggest organization or the one for you. Not necessarily best or biggest, but the one for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then they invite you to join this organization for life. And the reason I'm talking about it like this dramatically is because this is actually how it goes down. I personally think, having been a part of an organization for up until now, I guess like 3 years, um, and growing more distant from it recently, I think that it should definitely not be the first semester.
Yeah.
The rush should definitely not be the first semester. That it should be the second or third semester, ideally the third semester. And this is me coming from like my most sympathetic reform standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
because fraternities and sororities have a lot going on.
They do.
The reinforcement of like necessarily or inherently oppressive ideas like gender happens a lot.
Yeah.
So barring all of those things, and just all else equal, when rush should happen, I think it should not happen at the very beginning, because I didn't feel like I got a good look at a lot of the organizations.
Mm-hmm.
You're very like rushed into something, which is why it's called rush, I guess. And oftentimes these organizations supplant other potential social networks. So, for example, there are some dorms that don't have a ton of draw to them, other than they are like pretty and have food in them. They're just buildings, and they don't have any like extant culture
Mm-hmm.
or anything built into them, uh, in terms of a social network. Have we explained that MIT dorms have dorm culture?
I feel like we've mentioned it.
Yeah,
We
well,
don't talk about it enough though.
yeah, MIT dorms have dorm culture. It's one of the most bizarre anthropological phenomena ever.
Mm-hmm.
That when you put a whole bunch of like random children you don't know that don't know each other together, they'll like
You make a whole thing, yeah.
start traditions. Anyway, a lot of these dorms don't have that, and so what happens is a student will go into this dorm, see that it's sort of like kind of bland, and like no one introduces him, no one like embraces them, and they just sort of feel like kind of lost to the wood. I remember like going into Baker, which was my freshman dorm,
Mm-hmm.
and just wandering around the near empty halls and being like, this is depressing.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to make it through. And then in steps a fraternity or a
Mhm.
sorority, and they're like, hey, look, we have a house and we have parties and food and all of these things, and it's cheaper. And then you're like, oh wow, cool. And then they're like, hey, we'll also talk to your parents about this, so they'll be cool with it. And you're like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how was your rush process? Because mine was a lot.
Yeah. So something I'd like to mention. So I'm in a Black Greek letter organization. That's different from the MIT ones. So
True.
like the Black Greek letter ones, they sort of operate separately. They have citywide chapters that involve multiple schools. And even just like our social events and our initiation process is completely different. So MIT sororities, they have their own rush process. Which is like sort of what Gabe talked about, but it's not as liberal as I would say as like the fraternities. Like it's a lot more structured. You have to like meet the members of each sorority, talk to them over the course of many days, and then they have like a bidding process. Um, so my initiation process was different. The sorority doesn't actually allow you to talk about that publicly, so I can't talk about that too much. But yeah, it started off with me just getting to know the people in the chapter, and then going through the application process, and then receiving an invitation into the sorority itself. Another thing I'd like to mention: a lot of people live in these fraternities or sororities as opposed to living in a dorm. So it just sort of shows how huge that is at MIT. So I think something that we should definitely talk about is like the form of support we found in, our organizations or lack of support,
Mhm.
and whether you would make the same decision going back in time.
I've been thinking about this more recently. Like I um, don't like framing things in terms of what I would have done.
Mm,
I think that it was an immensely educational experience for me.
mm-hmm.
Partly because of the ways that I received support, and also the ways that I like specifically didn't receive support and realized that I needed that kind of help
Yeah.
or environment. So yeah, our experiences are necessarily different. I joined a non like just a white fraternity, and I
Mm-hmm.
say white because it doesn't have any sort of like uh, racial or ethnic distinctions,
Mm-hmm.
and so white people tend to join it on average
At
more.
higher rates, yeah.
Yeah, and when I got there, there were like a few more people of color than when I left, and I felt that I was closest to those people. I come from a very like I'm from LA, and
Mhm.
in a part that was like very mixed, and so I feel most comfortable in a group that's not primarily white, but also not. That isn't to say that I like, because I myself am half white. It's not the skin tone or anything. It's the construct of whiteness
Mhm.
that is different, and I think sometimes reinforced in fraternities. And I can
Mhm.
explain that a little further. I think it's the construction of one's identity outside of some of the outside of the identities of students of color.
Mhm.
Um, and this was constructed even by other students of color in things like really being pro American flag, or
Mhm.
really being pro America, or really being pro some element of the American industrial complex.
Yeah.
And you are allowed to do that. But in my own home environment, when I'm trying to discuss like these sorts of issues, and I have to constantly argue against people who disagree with me on fundamental issues, I feel that I wasn't supported in that way.
Mm.
And that while I appreciate those conversations and love to have them, I want a home base that that I want like a little bit of an echo chamber,
Yeah.
just like a tiny bit, so I can I can feel that I'm not wrong all the time.
Mm,
I don't always have to like prove to myself that like belong in a space or deserve to be there.
mm.
Like I had to talk to someone about whether or not affirmative action is necessary
This was within the fraternity.
within my fraternity.
Mm.
And while I would love to have that conversation with anyone,
You didn't need it there.
I just didn't need it there, and I didn't
Mhm.
need it for 2 hours, um,
Yeah.
like a couple feet away from where I sleep.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and
I
so
see.
and that's totally fine. Like I don't like I'm a fairly combative person, I think, in these
Mhm.
situations, and I was tired of combat. I started to become known as like the angry leftist. Uh, and that again, like there are cultural differences everywhere you see,
Mm-hmm.
and it's important to work through those and find some like common connection. And I have a lot of like very warm memories with people in
Mm-hmm.
this group. But I, you know, it's also okay to not have to have those. It's also okay to not want to live in a combative environment or a place that like drives
Yeah.
anxiety or where you have to discuss all these things all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it ties back to why I decided to join a Black organization. I I think coming to MIT shows you how unprepared you are at times for challenging things of the world. Like you
Yeah.
don't know how bad your imposter syndrome is until you're in a place like MIT, or like you don't know a lot of your insecurities until you're really just like challenged in every aspect of your life, and they just sort of come to the surface. So I needed like Black women in particular, who were going to just be really close to me and help me through those things. And I think my struggle was that I didn't necessarily feel like I received that support. Um, and I I was just I was also just like I was just looking for help, I think. And I felt like at times at MIT when I was really struggling, I didn't receive it as much as I would like to. Um, and there's an aspect of like, because I was one of the only people from MIT in my chapter. So, like,
Mm.
did people know how to help me? I think that was the question. And I think, when you're approaching a Greek organization, you always have to remember that they may culturally be like you, they may have the same values as you, but they won't necessarily provide the support that you need in your life. And I think that's a lesson that I learned. And I think if I was to go back in time, I would look for that a little bit more.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, building community is so difficult, especially when and again, this this kind of everything goes back to something else we talked about, but this reflects um, concerns about the rush process and how these organizations are formed.
Mm.
Um, it is tremendously difficult to form an organization and form it well and appropriately and have it deal with the nuances of its constituent members, um,
Mm.
from a week-long process
Yeah.
where you get kids coming in from literally everywhere around the country and the world, and then you base whether or not you want to live with them for the next 4 years and also communicate with them for the rest of your life off of a couple base interactions.
Mm.
Frankly, that's a really over romanticized, um, inappropriate way to judge relationships.
Yeah. Mm.
Um, and that's rough.
Yeah. And something you said earlier really resonated with me about like talking about whether you would have went back in time. Um, and I realized that, sort of walking away from Greek life was what I needed to really find the friends and the support systems that I needed at MIT. Um, and I think now I'm a senior, I kind of look back and I wish that I had focused my energy on different relationships a little more, but I would have never known that if it wasn't for like, walking into something and not finding the support I needed. And the national organization is great. They do amazing work. They're really fantastic, and I will always respect that. But like, it's just a life lesson to really search and find the help that you need and actually go for it.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that I will still hold love for all the people that I lived with, because we're all humans. We're all trying to, even the people that I disagreed with the absolute most, who held antithetical political and humanitarian views from my own. They were trying to apply their worldview in a way that they thought would best improve the world and improve their own role in making sure that we're all better off. I think they were super wrong about the way that they went about it, but you have to deal with reality on reality's terms. In summation of what we talked about so far, I want to also be explicit that I don't think, and I don't know if this reflects how you feel, but I don't feel that there are good or bad people in this world. I think that that's very reductionist, very reductive, and I tend to not view the world that way. I think that everyone has capacity for what one might consider good and bad. And it is the situations and the systems in which we find ourselves that guide our individual actions. And so I think that that means a lot of people could do really good things and really bad things in the same period of time within the same organization. Like, I know that I had some of the most fun I've had at MIT with these people, but I also had horrible times and have witnessed like pretty awful things within the same organization with the same people in the same house.
Yeah. And there's something that you said, Gabe, that was like rerunning in my head. You said it last episode, and we were talking about wokeness, and you're like, okay, being woke is not remembering everything from your Haas class, it's your ability to think critically. And I thought about that a lot, because it's like when you kind of like walk around this world and you go to a place like MIT that really opens your mind up to a lot of things, and you have to sort of interact with the world differently, you realize that people just have very different models to approaching the world. Like, if you know anything about machine learning, like you put in a bunch of data, you have an algorithm that creates a model. The model is supposed to be used on new data. And when you really think about it, the people in this world just have different models than you do. Some aren't created as well. Some are, created with a lot of data. Some are, some have a good algorithm, some don't. But it comes back to this thing. It's like, people aren't bad per se. They just have different experiences that shape their thinking in a very different way than you.
Go ahead, sorry.
And they act on it, and it may hurt you, exactly. And it may not work, and it may not be what you need to receive the help or love that you need. But you just think about it, and you're like, okay, I can't blame you for this, because this is how you think things should work.
Yeah, and there are the ideas of like radical empathy or sympathy, radical acceptance, and these things are all extremely difficult to do. Finding acceptance and loving someone who has hurt you feels impossible. And sometimes you don't have the time or patience for it, and that's okay. You don't need to do this all the time. But also finding those times and spaces where that is possible can really like reframe and the way that you look at the world, and really make it more beautiful. All of these people are trying their best, or they're not, and sometimes they're really damaging people. But even when those things happen, when these painful things happen to yourself or other people, and you understand it not as malice against you, from a bad person, that someone, it's just that everything happens all the time, but things can happen, and that doesn't reflect doesn't need to reflect the person. It can reflect their environment.
Yeah.
And I think that's very helpful for feeling our way through the world. Um, yeah, I also mentioned like the idea of whiteness earlier, and I know that that probably triggers in some people like a negative reaction to what you might see as identity politics. And I want to let that imaginary person know that we're not relying on the crutch of identity, but rather like looking at the world critically and and relying on a framework that is very legitimate, has been thought through a lot by a lot of very important thinkers and feminists, and and it's the idea that none of these things are real. Like race isn't real, gender isn't real beyond the meaning that we have assigned to it through our like collective means, our collective knowledge, through our through like capitalist systems. And so when I talk about whiteness, it's not just white people, it's that construct of whiteness that exists outside of other races and as its own amorphous blob of culture that I myself was, I guess, not accustomed to in the exact formulation that it has in MIT fraternities.
Yeah, I understand that. So, you know, taking this sort of framework about how people are, and you know the decisions that they make and how that affects you, how do you sort of think of your time at MIT? You know, do you feel like, you know, at MIT you've been affected by not bad people, but like people who just don't know better? Or, you know, how has MIT shaped that thinking? And how do you like sort of reflect on your time at MIT?
Something you said earlier, I think, helps me think about this. It's the three things that I synthesized from, I guess, what you were saying when you were looking for a Greek organization is like a support system, sisterhood, and something that lasted longer than MIT or the 4 years. I think that so I've since sort of like distanced myself from my fraternity. I left alongside one of my friends to live in East Campus, which is another dorm with a very strong culture. And there, I think I did find a support system. I found some semblance of family, and something that lasts longer than MIT. But in doing so, I've also realized that I maybe didn't need to find anything, but just learn how to find these things.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to move around a lot. We all are. And even if you did stay in the same place, that place doesn't stay the same. The people around there move. You know, people are born, people die. The world changes, and while it's important to find static groups of people that you are going to like rock with or ride with for the rest of your life or a long amount of time, it's also the ability to find those people in the future, what to look for and how to interact with people, and how to think about the world critically. How to identify relationships, how to make sure that they don't, because I've like still even now, like we're all horrible at relationships, horrible at dealing with people's emotions. These things are incredibly complicated, and some of the smartest people in the world here are the worst at it. So yeah, sorry, that was a long answer, but basically just learning how to find the things that I was looking for.
Yeah, I really love that answer. I love that a lot. Because it's been the same thing for me. And like, if you're interested, if you're listening to this and you're interested in coming to MIT, I want you to understand that the most important lessons that I have learned, and maybe you have learned too, Gabe, is the life skills, like how to find friends, how to be supported, when to reach out for help, what sort of help I need. And then, you know, the, like I'm a physics major, and the most important lessons I've learned have not been related to physics. They've been related to thinking about the world, approaching problems, understanding things like race, like, you know, not just blackness, but understanding like how blackness interacts with whiteness and other races, how gender is a factor in so many things, how to look at the world through different lenses. And um, I don't know, I just, I think that's the thing that MIT does to you, which I'm really thankful for. And, you know, I'll criticize the Institute for a lot of things that it does, but you know, when people say like the people at MIT are the best thing, it's not even just like you're meeting cool people that are doing a bunch of different things. It's like you're learning life skills that are really important for the rest of your time, and they really frame the way you think about the world.
Yeah. Conversely, people who go through MIT and don't pick that up,
Mm-hmm.
they do. We all pick up also like technical skills and engineering
Yeah.
skills and whatever. But I hope that all of the people that feel they've gone through MIT or gone through their lives not picking up on the soft skills, the way that you talk to people and communicating. Just it's never too late to learn those things.
Yeah.
Um, and it's okay to feel that you don't know how to do those things, but what is not okay is just giving up on that. You cannot
Yeah.
do that. You cannot avoid talking to people. I'm sorry, that is not an option.
What did you say last time? You're like, if you're racist, just think critically, and
Yeah,
and if you're
just
still racist, come talk to me.
yeah, right. I and like learning about all of these like important constructs like gender and race through our conversations and analysis in those conversations
Mhm.
is very useful. And so yeah, I think I want to say that it's very useful in the way that that we are rethinking about how these things should exist.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of these constructs are rooted in very dangerous, very oppressive ideas. Um, the the idea of like othering something
Mhm.
as a way to mediate the dehumanization that is required
Mhm.
for things like labor exploitation or exploitation of some sort.
Mhm.
Um, these constructs mean a lot, and you learn a lot talking to people and thinking about them.
Mhm.
Um, and I just hope that everyone thinks long and hard about all of these things,
Yeah.
and not just joke about them.
Mhm.
We joke about a lot of these things, but someday they're all going to have to change. They're all going to come down in some sort or another, and we will have learned a lot about the idea of blackness and whiteness and gender, and we're going to be able to like pick and choose what aspects of these things we want to move forward and leave behind.
Mhm.
In the same way that when we joined like a Greek life,
Mhm.
when you joined your sorority and I joined my fraternity, we learned a lot about these constructs, and then left them.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean we learned nothing from them or got nothing. Just because I no longer want to be part of an organization that is
Mhm.
all male, because I disagree with that premise. I now know what masculinity can look like.
Yeah.
To not to overuse the term, but like what toxic masculinity can look like, what healthy masculinity could look like,
Mhm.
um, what happens when that's challenged.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess to conclude, I'm glad that I joined this, but think think long and hard before you do. I think.
Yeah. Don't take this as like, oh, I could just join and I'll learn something from it. No. You should
No.
really think about the people. And you know, when I was a freshman at MIT, I don't think I had the capacity to think critically in social settings like this. Like I couldn't have looked at a sorority and really thought about what it meant for my life and my identity and such. Like I don't think I was ready for that. but I'm ready for that now. And it's like I'm so much more selective about the opportunities I go for and like who I am as a person, even like the jobs I take. And there's an element of privilege in that. Like I can do that, but it's something I needed to do, and it's a tough experience that I had to go through, but I'm happy I did, because like I'm never going to just approach an organization the same way. So I'm happy. I don't regret anything, and that's
Yeah,
good.
I guess some advice if you're still interested
Mhm.
in these kinds of organizations, like the For Life organizations that tend to be gendered. Spend time like outside of them before you join them. MIT doesn't really let you do that. Other colleges do, but even then, it's just a longer period of posturing
Mhm.
before you join. But actually, spend some like time thinking about it externally before you join it. If you don't like
Mhm.
how an organization looks on the outside, you're probably not going to enjoy it on the inside.
Yeah,
Um,
that is true.
and if you do, and if you're still interested in it after you don't like it from the outside, um, then you've made that choice, and you've at least like put in that consideration. You know,
Mhm.
think about like gender and race and all of these other things, and how this organization will enforce or reinforce these relationships.
Yeah. And think about your own growth. Like, how do you want to grow? Are you seeing examples? And you may not find that example. You're going to grow as an individual either way, but like, you know, does this organization really have your values? Is this like what you want to sharpen in yourself? And then go towards that. And, once again, like your path is your own. It's not like you're going to end up like anyone else, but there is an aspect of your change that you are in control of. And it comes down to the things you decide to join, the people that you want to be around and such. And, it's okay to make decisions like that. So anyways, we're definitely running a little long. Let's talk about, what future plans are. Thanksgiving is around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your plans, and yeah, how are you going about that?
I have no idea. I want to go back home. I'm not sure how safe it is to do that. It's pretty dramatically difficult to get tested outside of MIT,
Yeah.
and they just won't let us onto campus to test ourselves. But that's okay. So, barring that, I guess I would like to go home. I'm working on some personal projects finally,
That's
but
good.
it's mostly just like I'm trying to get through this semester. This is my second to last one. I
Hmm.
have like one aerospace class to take after this. I'm just very tired.
Yeah.
So trying to finish the end of the semester and then position myself for future things.
Yeah. So it's the same thing with me. There are interviews coming up for full-time jobs, for fellowships that are coming up, that I'm just trying to get through. I would rather not go home, at least like for the semester and for the spring, just because, online learning was hard enough on campus away from home, and
Mm.
I anticipate it'd be even worse at home. So trying to figure out how to get around that, is a challenge, but like I'm optimistic that, like, in the spring it will be a little better than now, and that the rest of the semester will just be a little smoother with more breaks, because we haven't had a lot of breaks this whole semester, like, which is hard. um, yeah, but I'm excited for you, Gabe. I'm excited to hear more about how the semester goes, um,
Yeah.
how home is for you, and what else happens at MIT. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. You too.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening to this episode of MIT Is. We'll be back next month with another episode. So, if you, I don't actually know what I was gonna say.
You know,
uh,
have a nice day.
have it. All right. Well, thank you for listening. Enjoy your day.